They attempted to stop the wedding. The Apache warrior smiled, "My bride now." The sun was just beginning to rise over the jagged mountains of the southwest, casting a golden glow across the dry, dusty land. The air was crisp and carried the faint scent of sagebrush and pine, mixing with the earthy smell of the soil. On a small ranch nestled in a quiet valley, Clara Thompson stepped outside her family's modest wooden house. She breathed in the morning air deeply, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face. The land had been her home for as long as she could remember, and she knew every hill, every tree, and every winding path that led through the valley. Life here was not easy, but Clara had grown up strong and resilient, shaped by the harsh realities of frontier living. Clara's family had lived on the ranch for several generations. Her father, a sturdy man with a kind heart and weathered hands, had taught her to ride horses, mend fences, and handle a rifle, though she seldom needed it. Her mother, gentle but firm, had filled Clara's days with stories of courage, kindness, and the importance of making good choices even when life was difficult. Clara had 2 younger siblings who adored her, and she had spent countless hours playing and exploring in the hills nearby. Despite the challenges, there was a sense of peace in the rhythm of ranch life, feeding the animals, tending the fields, and walking through the open fields at sunset. Yet, life in the valley was not without danger. Stories of conflict between settlers and the Apache tribes who lived in the surrounding mountains were common. Clara had heard them since she was a child. Tales of raids, battles, and heroic warriors who fought to protect their families and lands. Most of the settlers viewed the Apache with fear, and the Apache in turn were cautious of the settlers. Despite this tension, Clara had always felt a curious respect for the Apache. When she was younger, she had met a few children from the tribe while exploring the hills, and she had listened with fascination to their stories about the mountains, the animals, and their customs. Even though they were strangers, she could feel their deep connection to the land, a bond that she herself shared in her own way. As Clara walked toward the small barn to feed the chickens, she thought about the day ahead. Today was supposed to be one of the happiest days of her life. She was engaged to marry a young rancher from a neighboring valley, a man who had shown her kindness and had promised to stand by her no matter what. Her family was excited, the neighbors had been invited, and everything seemed perfectly in order. But a small part of her, a part she hardly acknowledged, felt a strange flutter of unease. She could not explain why, but there was a sensation in her chest, a whisper of uncertainty that she tried to push aside. Clara was not easily frightened. She had spent enough time on her own in the mountains to know how to handle herself. But life had taught her that even the bravest heart could sense danger before it arrived. Still, she shook the feeling off and smiled. Today was a day of celebration. She had spent weeks preparing, helping her mother sew the dress she would wear, arranging small flowers for the ceremony, and making sure every detail was perfect. She imagined the smiles of her family, the laughter of her friends, and the warmth of the sun shining down on the gathering. This was the life she had dreamed of, a life filled with love, family, and hope. Meanwhile, not far from the valley, the mountains held their own secrets. Hidden among the rocks and trees, a young Apache warrior named Nantan observed the land with keen eyes. He was known among his people for his courage, intelligence, and deep sense of honor. Nantan had grown up learning the ways of his tribe, learning to read the signs of nature, track animals, and understand the movements of those who came into their lands. Life for him was also shaped by the tension between his people and the settlers. He had witnessed conflicts, but he also understood that not all outsiders were enemies. Some, like Clara, had touched his curiosity and respect from afar. Nantan's story was different from Clara's in many ways. Where she had lived in relative peace on the ranch, he had grown up constantly aware of the delicate balance between safety and survival. He had learned that courage was not just about fighting. It was about protecting, respecting, and making choices guided by honor. Despite the years of caution and struggle, Nantan carried a quiet hope in his heart, the kind of hope that few outside his world could understand. And somewhere in that hope was a curiosity about the young woman he had seen from the hills, a woman who moved with confidence and kindness, whose presence seemed to calm the restless wind around her. Back in the valley, Clara finished her morning chores and returned to the house. She helped her mother prepare a simple breakfast, the aroma of fresh bread and coffee filling the room. Her father joined them, offering gentle encouragement and words of wisdom about the life ahead. Even her younger siblings tried to act grown up, giggling as they rushed to help set the table. The house was filled with warmth, laughter, and the comforting hum of routine. Yet, outside, the mountains watched silently, holding secrets that neither Clara nor her family could yet imagine. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Clara took a moment to stand on the porch and look out over the valley. The land stretched endlessly before her, golden fields dotted with patches of green, a river winding its way through the hills. It was a place of beauty, but it was also a place where danger could appear without warning. She had grown up respecting that truth, understanding that life here required vigilance, courage, and the ability to trust only when it was earned. Still, she felt a sense of calm today, a belief that nothing could disturb the peace of this special moment. Little did she know, the calm of the morning was about to change in ways she could never have imagined. In the distance, the faint sound of movement among the trees went unnoticed, a shadow gliding silently over rocks and hills. Nantan and a few of his closest companions were approaching, moving with the skill of those who had lived their lives attuned to the land. They carried no weapons in the open, only the weight of purpose in their hearts. For Nantan, this was not an act of aggression, but an act of destiny. He had seen Clara before, admired her courage and spirit from afar, and now, for reasons he could not fully explain, he felt compelled to step forward. As Clara returned to her chores, gathering eggs from the hens and feeding the small animals, she could not see the silent figures moving through the mountains. She did not know that in just a few hours, the peaceful day she had imagined would become a moment of history, a story told for generations about courage, respect, and the meeting of two worlds. She only knew what she had always known, that the land was alive, that life required courage, and that the choices one made could change everything. By midday, the valley was alive with anticipation. Friends and neighbors began to arrive, dressed in their best clothes, carrying baskets of food, and sharing smiles and laughter. The air was filled with the sound of conversation, the clip-clop of horses, and the occasional bark of a dog. Clara's heart beat faster as she saw familiar faces, each one a reminder of the love and support that surrounded her. She tried to focus on the joy of the day, brushing aside the tiny flicker of unease that remained. At the edge of the mountains, Nantan paused to look down at the valley below. He had grown up in these hills, but today everything felt different. The sunlight reflected off the fields, the trees swayed gently in the breeze, and in the middle of it all was Clara, unaware of the presence of the warrior who had watched over her from a distance. Nantan smiled quietly, knowing that what he was about to do would change both their lives forever. He did not approach lightly, nor did he act without thought. This was a decision guided by respect, courage, and an unexplainable connection he felt with the young woman below. And so, as the morning gave way to afternoon, the stage was set. Clara went about her preparations, laughing with her family, sharing stories, and feeling the excitement of the day. Nantan moved silently through the trees, each step measured, each breath taken with care. The paths of these two lives were about to intersect in a way neither could have imagined, a meeting that would test courage, honor, and the power of understanding across worlds. The valley seemed calm, but the mountains held their secrets. The story of Clara Thompson and the Apache warrior Nantan was just beginning, and neither the settlers nor the tribes would soon forget the events that were about to unfold. For in a land filled with both beauty and danger, the choices of the heart could surpass fear, and the courage to act with honor could create legends that lasted far beyond a single day. The sun climbed higher over the valley, shining brightly on the little ranch where Clara Thompson lived. The warmth made the day feel joyful, but Clara could not shake a tiny flicker of nervousness. She had spent the morning preparing, checking the small arrangements of flowers, helping her mother with the final touches on her dress, and making sure everything was ready for the wedding. The sound of laughter from her younger siblings and the chatter of neighbors arriving filled the air, yet she felt a quiet tension in her heart. Something about today felt different, though. She could not say what it was. As the settlers began gathering near the small wooden chapel built at the edge of the valley, whispers of excitement spread quickly. Friends and neighbors had traveled from miles around, bringing gifts, food, and warm wishes. Some carried baskets of fresh bread and fruit, while others brought chickens or vegetables from their farms. Children ran in the open fields, their laughter echoing through the valley, and the adults greeted one another with smiles, handshakes, and familiar greetings. Everyone was looking forward to the celebration, unaware that events beyond their imagination were quietly approaching from the mountains. Far above the valley, hidden among the rocks and trees, Nantan and a few of his closest companions moved silently. The Apache warrior was calm, his eyes scanning the valley below with focus and determination. For months he had watched Clara from a distance, noticing her kindness, her courage, and the way she moved through life with confidence. He had never forgotten the small moments he had seen, Clara helping an injured animal, laughing with her siblings, or quietly tending to her chores. Though he and Clara came from very different worlds, he felt a connection he could not explain. Today he intended to act, guided by honor, respect, and a deep sense of purpose. Nantan's companions were skilled warriors, strong and loyal. They trusted him completely, knowing that his decisions were guided by wisdom and courage. As they moved closer to the valley, they carefully avoided paths that would alert the settlers. Every step was calculated, every movement deliberate. They had no intention of harming anyone. Their presence was not a threat but a statement. Nantan understood the fear that the settlers might feel, and he was determined to show that his actions came from respect, not violence. Meanwhile, Clara was busy helping her mother arrange flowers along the path that led to the chapel. She smiled as she watched the children place petals in neat lines on the ground, imagining how beautiful it would look when she walked down the aisle. Her dress was nearly finished, and the gentle sunlight highlighted the careful stitching her mother had done. Clara felt a mix of excitement and nerves, her heart beating faster with every passing moment. Well, she had dreamed of this day for a long time, but now that it had arrived, it seemed almost too real, too significant to believe. Suddenly a distant sound reached her ears, faint but unusual. It was not the laughter of children or the clatter of wagons. It was the soft rustle of movement coming from the hills. Clara paused, squinting toward the mountains. The sound was subtle, but it carried a rhythm that made her pulse quicken. She tried to ignore it at first, convincing herself it was just the wind or perhaps a herd of animals moving through the trees. But something about the sound felt intentional, purposeful, as if someone, or something, was coming toward the valley. Her unease grew as the rustling became more distinct. Horses in the nearby pens whinnied nervously, sensing the change in the air. Dogs barked and ran in circles, alert to the unseen presence. Clara's father, noticing the sudden tension, walked toward her with a questioning look. "Clara, what is it?" he asked gently. She shook her head, unsure how to explain what she felt. "I'm not sure, Father. I think someone might be coming down from the mountains," she replied. Her voice was calm, but there was an undercurrent of worry. From the mountains, Nantan signaled to his companions to slow their pace. He could see the valley clearly now, the chapel, the people gathering, and Clara moving among them. His heart beat with a strange mixture of anticipation and calm resolve. He knew that his arrival would surprise them and perhaps frighten them at first. But he also knew that fear could be met with understanding if one approached with honor and respect. He took a deep breath, feeling the strength of his ancestors in his chest, and led his group forward, stepping carefully along the path that would bring them within view of the settlers. Back in the valley, neighbors had begun forming small groups, chatting and sharing stories. Some spoke of past hardships, others of hopes for the future, and all of them were unaware of the silent observers descending from the hills. Clara continued her work, adjusting flowers and straightening the benches, her thoughts drifting to the young man she was about to marry. She remembered the day he had asked for her hand in marriage, how nervous and excited he had been, and how she had laughed and agreed without hesitation. Everything had seemed so simple and certain at that time, and she had never imagined that this day would bring anything other than happiness. But now, with the soft rustling growing louder, the certainty she had felt began to fade. Her instincts told her that something unusual was about to happen, something that could not be ignored. She glanced toward the hills once more and saw movement among the trees, figures stepping carefully down the slopes, their shapes unfamiliar but unmistakably human. Her breath caught in her throat, and she felt a mix of fear and curiosity. Who were these people, and why were they coming toward them? The settlers began to notice as well. Conversations stopped, and a quiet tension fell over the crowd. Eyes turned toward the hills, where the figures were becoming more visible. Some people reached for their rifles, while others whispered urgently among themselves. The sense of unease grew, spreading like wildfire through the gathering. Clara's father stepped forward, raising his hand to calm the crowd. "Stay calm," he said firmly. "We don't know what this is yet. Let's see before we act." Nantan and his companions moved with deliberate care, their hands empty, showing no intention of harming anyone. They stepped into the clearing at the edge of the valley, their faces calm, their eyes steady. The settlers froze, unsure what to do, their fear mixing with curiosity. Nantan's gaze found Clara, and for a brief moment everything else faded away. The crowd, the noise, the uncertainty. All he saw was her, and all she saw was him. There was a strange, almost magnetic understanding between them, a silent recognition that went beyond words. The tension in the valley was almost unbearable. The settlers whispered among themselves, some urging caution, others suggesting retreat. Clara's heart pounded in her chest, a mixture of fear, wonder, and an unexplainable calm that seemed to come from somewhere deep within her. She noticed that Nantan's expression was not angry or threatening. Instead, there was a quiet strength, a confidence that demanded respect. It was clear he had come with purpose, but that purpose was not to harm or destroy. As Nantan stepped closer, his companions staying just behind him, He spoke in a voice that carried over the valley. "We mean no harm," he said, using a mix of English and the Apache language. The settlers stared in surprise, unsure how to respond. His words were calm, steady, and carried an authority that was difficult to ignore. Clara felt a strange sense of reassurance, as if the warrior's presence, though unexpected, was meant to protect rather than threaten. Clara's mother stepped forward, her hand lightly touching Clara's arm. "Who are they?" she asked in a whisper. Clara shook her head, unable to answer fully. "I don't know," she replied, "but I think they aren't here to fight." She could see it in their eyes. The respect, the restraint, the careful control of their movements. The tension did not vanish completely, but it softened slightly, replaced by a cautious curiosity. Nantan continued to approach slowly, finally stopping a few yards away from Clara. His gaze remained on her, and for a moment the world seemed to hold its breath. Then, almost gently, he spoke again. "Clara," he said, her name flowing from his lips with care. The sound of it made her pulse quicken, and she felt a mix of shock and recognition. She had never heard her name spoken with such confidence and warmth by someone so unknown to her. It was a moment that seemed suspended in time, a moment that would linger in memory long after it passed. The settlers began to relax slightly, realizing that Nantan's approach was not hostile. Some lowered their rifles while others stepped back to give him space. Clara's father remained cautious but observant, his eyes never leaving the warrior. He could see that Nantan carried himself with honor and that his intentions did not seem harmful. The crowd's whispers grew softer, replaced by a careful watchfulness, as everyone waited to see what would happen next. As the afternoon sun warmed the valley, Clara stood still, her heart pounding, as Nantan finally smiled, a gentle, almost shy smile that held both courage and respect. For the first time, Clara understood that this was not a moment of fear, but a moment of destiny. The events unfolding were not random. Something larger than themselves was at work, and both the settlers and the Apache were about to witness a story that would be remembered for generations. The valley seemed to hold its breath as Nantan remained still, his eyes never leaving Clara. The crowd of settlers watched silently, some unsure whether to step forward, some frozen in fear, and some simply staring in awe at the unexpected visitors. The children clung to their parents, while the adults whispered quietly among themselves, trying to make sense of the sudden arrival of the Apache warriors. The quiet was broken only by the soft wind moving through the trees and the distant clatter of wagons as late arrivals approached the chapel. Clara's heart raced, a mix of fear, excitement, and an unexplainable curiosity. She had never been this close to someone from the Apache tribe, and yet something in Nantan's presence felt different. It was not threatening or cruel. There was a calm strength in the way he stood, a confidence that was commanding but not arrogant. Clara's instincts told her that he had come with purpose, and that purpose was not to harm. She took a small step forward, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Her father moved beside her, a protective hand lightly resting on her shoulder. "Clara," he said softly, "be careful. We don't know what they want." Clara nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. She could feel the tension in the air, like a thick rope holding everyone together, stretching tight with uncertainty. The settlers were tense, whispering about what could happen, and the few children who had wandered closer now stepped back, sensing the seriousness of the moment. Nantan's gaze softened slightly, and he spoke again, his voice steady but gentle. "I have come to speak to her," he said, pointing to Clara. His words carried across the small clearing, and the crowd murmured in surprise. No one had expected him to speak, and yet there was something in his tone that demanded respect. He did not shout, nor did he make any threatening gestures. He simply stood tall, letting his presence speak for him. One of the settlers, a man named Thomas, stepped forward, his rifle loosely held at his side. "You cannot just come here and take someone from us," he said, his voice firm but cautious. "This is our valley, our people, our home." His words echoed the fears and instincts of everyone present. The tension grew, and Clara's mother clutched her daughter's arm tightly, fear flashing in her eyes. Yet Clara remained calm, her heart beating rapidly, but her mind clear. She sensed that Nantan's arrival, though shocking, was not meant to harm anyone. Nantan nodded slightly, acknowledging Thomas's words. "I understand your concern," he said, carefully. "I do not come with anger. I come with respect." His English was clear, though accented, and it carried the weight of sincerity. The settlers exchanged uneasy glances. Respect and honor were not words they had expected to hear from the Apache warriors in this tense moment. Clara's father studied Nantan closely, noting the calmness in his posture, the careful movements of his hands and the steady gaze that met theirs without aggression. Clara stepped slightly forward, her voice quiet but firm. "Father," she said, "please let me speak." "I think I understand." Her father looked at her, uncertainty in his eyes. "Are you sure, Clara?" he asked. She nodded, determination shining in her gaze. "Yes, please." He sighed, releasing his hand from her shoulder and stepping back slightly. Clara took a deep breath, walking toward Nantan, feeling the eyes of the crowd follow her every move. As she reached a safe distance, she looked into Nantan's eyes. There was no malice there, only focus, courage, and a strange, quiet warmth. She realized that his presence, though unexpected, was meant to create understanding, not fear. "Why are you here?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly, but with a sense of calm authority. Nantan's face softened into a gentle smile. "I have watched you," he said simply. "I respect you, your courage, and your heart. I could not let this day pass without speaking to you." Clara's breath caught at his words. She had never experienced anything like this. A stranger, a warrior, coming forward with such honesty and respect. She felt a mix of fear, curiosity, and a strange sense of destiny. The crowd murmured among themselves, whispers of disbelief and intrigue filling the air. Some settlers exchanged worried glances, unsure how to react, while others leaned in, eager to hear more. Thomas stepped forward again, though more cautiously this time. "You cannot just decide for someone else," he said. "This is not your right." Nantan shook his head gently. "I do not wish to take forcefully what is not freely given. I only wish to speak and be heard." The crowd fell silent again, sensing the careful balance between honor and challenge. Clara felt her heart racing, but also a strange sense of calm. She knew that words and understanding were about to decide the course of this day. Clara looked around at the people she loved, the children, her mother, her father, and the neighbors who had come to celebrate. She realized that her courage would matter now more than ever. She spoke slowly, clearly, and with purpose. "I will hear him," she said, her voice carrying across the clearing. "And I ask you all to listen as well. Do not act in fear. Let us understand before we judge." The settlers blinked in surprise, some nodding cautiously, others still tense but willing to follow her lead. Nantan nodded respectfully to Clara, then turned slightly to face the crowd. "I come with respect," he repeated. "I do not wish to harm anyone. I seek only to honor the one I have long admired from afar." His words were simple, yet they carried weight. The settlers felt the honesty in his tone, the calm determination in his stance. It was clear that he had no desire for violence, only a wish to connect and to be understood. The air seemed to shift slightly as Nantan's companions stepped back, giving him space. They stood silently, their presence reassuring rather than threatening. Clara felt the tension in the crowd ease, replaced by a cautious curiosity. She realized that this was not a battle to fight, but a moment of understanding to navigate. She turned to her father, who watched her with pride and concern. He nodded slightly, signaling that he trusted her judgment. Clara took another step toward Nantan, her eyes meeting his. "I have seen your actions," she said softly. "I have felt your respect. I will hear you, but everything must be fair and honorable. No one will be hurt, and no one will be forced. Do you understand?" Nantan bowed his head slightly. "Yes," he said. "Everything will be done with honor and respect. I seek only truth and understanding." The settlers began to relax more visibly. Some lowered their rifles completely, while others stepped back to give space. The children peeked curiously from behind adults, sensing that the situation was no longer dangerous. Clara felt a strange sense of relief, though her heart continued to race. She knew that what happened next could change everything. The day that had begun with the promise of a simple wedding was now unfolding into a story of courage, trust, and connection between two very different worlds. Nantan stepped closer to Clara, still maintaining a respectful distance. He spoke her name again, gently, as if testing the sound of it aloud. "Clara," he said, "I do not come as an enemy. I come as one who honors your courage, your heart, and your spirit. I ask only for your understanding." Clara's heart fluttered. There was something in his voice, something sincere and gentle that made her feel a connection she could not explain. She realized that fear was giving way to curiosity, and curiosity to understanding. She turned to the crowd once more, addressing her family and neighbors. "He does not wish to harm us," she said firmly. "He comes with respect and honesty. We must listen before we act in fear." Her words brought a sense of calm to the gathering. The settlers began to nod slowly, recognizing the wisdom in her words. Even Thomas, who had been skeptical, lowered his gaze, considering the possibility that the warrior before them was indeed honorable. Nantan's expression softened further, and a small, almost shy smile appeared on his face. He could sense the shift in the valley, the tension giving way to cautious understanding. He knew that the moment was delicate, and that every word, every movement mattered. Yet he also felt a quiet sense of hope, a hope that the hearts of these people, despite the differences between their worlds, could recognize honesty, respect, and courage when they saw it. Clara took a deep breath, steadying herself. She felt a sense of determination rising within her. She understood that today would not be simple, that the events unfolding would challenge her courage and understanding. But she also knew that she could face this challenge with grace, honesty, and strength. She looked into Nantan's eyes and nodded slightly, signaling that she was ready to hear him fully. Nantan stepped forward carefully, his voice low but clear. "I have admired you for a long time," he said. "From afar I have seen your kindness, your courage, and your spirit. I have come today not to take by force, but to honor you, to speak honestly, and to seek understanding." Clara felt her chest tighten at his words. They were simple, yet filled with meaning. She sensed that he spoke the truth, that his intentions were genuine, and that this moment was about to become a turning point in her life, and in the lives of everyone in the valley. The valley was silent, except for the soft rustle of the wind moving through the tall grass and the occasional whisper of a curious neighbor. The settlers watched closely, their eyes flicking between Clara and Nantan, unsure of what would happen next. The children clung to their parents, sensing the gravity of the moment, while the adults whispered quietly, sharing nervous glances. It was clear that something extraordinary was unfolding in the valley, a meeting that none of them could have predicted, a moment that would be remembered for years to come. Clara felt her heart beating faster than ever. She stood tall, holding her ground, trying to keep her mind steady despite the storm of emotions inside her. Fear, curiosity, and wonder mixed together in a way she had never felt before. She could see the sincerity in Nantan's eyes, the careful way he carried himself, and the strength behind his calm demeanor. Yet she also understood the weight of the moment. This was no ordinary meeting. The eyes of everyone in the valley were upon them, and the outcome could change the lives of many. Nantan took a slow step forward, his hands visible, showing that he carried no weapons. He spoke softly but clearly, his voice carrying across the small clearing. "I do not wish to fight," he said. "I come only to honor what I have long admired. I seek understanding and truth, not conflict. Let no one be harmed today." His words were met with silence. The settlers, unsure how to respond, yet slowly, a few faces relaxed, recognizing the honesty in his tone. Even Thomas, who had been skeptical from the beginning, lowered his rifle slightly, his expression thoughtful. Clara's father stepped closer to her, his hand gently resting on her shoulder. "Clara," he said quietly, "this is your choice. Speak your heart, and we will follow your lead." Clara nodded, feeling a surge of courage. She knew that her actions in the next moments would shape not only her life but also the way her family and neighbors saw the situation. She inhaled deeply, trying to steady her racing heart. She had to be strong, fair, and clear for herself and for everyone watching. Clara turned fully to face Nantan, her eyes meeting his with a steady gaze. "I hear your words," she said softly but firmly. "I see that you come with respect. But understand this, nothing will be done without my consent, and no one will be harmed. Do you promise this?" Nantan bowed his head slightly, his eyes never leaving hers. "I promise," he said. "Everything will be done with honor and respect. My intentions are true." His calm assurance brought Clara a small measure of relief. She felt a strange sense of connection, as though their hearts understood one another across the divide of their worlds. The settlers watched closely as the two spoke. Whispers traveled through the crowd, some fearful, some curious, and some amazed at the courage Clara displayed. The children peered from behind adults, wide-eyed and silent, sensing the importance of the moment. Clara's mother, still holding her daughter's hand, nodded slightly, showing quiet approval. The tension in the air was thick, but it was no longer filled with fear alone. Something else had entered the valley. Hope. Nantan took another step forward, closing the distance between him and Clara, though still leaving enough space to show respect. "Clara," he said, "I have come for you not to take but to honor. I have watched your courage, your kindness, and your spirit. I wish only to speak honestly and seek understanding." Clara felt a shiver run down her spine. There was honesty in his words, and she sensed that this moment was more than just a meeting. It was a choice, a turning point that could shape the future. The crowd stirred slightly, unsure how to react. Some settlers whispered urgently to each other, worried about what might happen. Others remained silent, drawn in by the tension and the unusual respect that seemed to radiate from Nantan. The children, sensing the seriousness of the moment, stayed close to their parents, their eyes wide as they watched the interaction unfold. Clara's father, who had been cautious and protective, now watched his daughter with pride. She was handling the situation with courage and wisdom beyond her years. Clara took a step closer to Nantan, her voice clear and calm. "I see your respect," she said. "I hear your words. But understand that respect alone is not enough. I must feel safe, and I must trust you completely." Nantan nodded, his expression serious. "I understand," he said. "I do not wish to cause fear. I wish only to honor and to speak truthfully. Nothing will be done without your consent." The settlers began to relax slightly, though some still kept a cautious eye on the warrior. Thomas, who had been one of the most vocal skeptics, finally lowered his rifle completely. "Perhaps we were too quick to judge," he muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. Others nodded quietly, realizing that fear had clouded their initial judgment. Clara felt a small sense of relief. The hardest part was over. The hardest part was standing her ground and speaking her truth. Nantan's companions stepped back, giving him space, their presence still reassuring but unobtrusive. Clara could see the careful way they moved, each gesture showing discipline and respect. It was clear that they were united not by aggression but by loyalty and honor. The tension in the valley began to shift further, from fear to cautious understanding. Clara realized that this moment was delicate, but it was also full of possibility. Taking a deep breath, Clara spoke again, her voice carrying across the clearing. "We are all here today to celebrate love," she said. "And though this is unexpected, I believe we can find understanding. If you truly come with respect, then I will listen. But everyone must remember, nothing happens without agreement. Nothing happens with fear." Nantan nodded solemnly. "Yes," he said. "Everything will be fair and honorable. My actions are guided only by respect and truth." The crowd grew quieter, absorbing the weight of the words. The wind whispered through the trees as if acknowledging the shift in the air. Clara felt a strange calm wash over her, a feeling of strength she had not known before. She realized that this was not just about her. It was about the people around her, the valley she loved, and the possibility of connection across two very different worlds. Nantan stepped closer, his gaze softening. "Clara," he said, "I cannot stay silent any longer. I have long admired you, and I cannot let this day pass without honoring what I feel. I ask only for your understanding and your choice, nothing else." She could feel the gravity of his words, the seriousness of the moment. She looked into his eyes and saw honesty, courage, and a deep respect that went beyond what she had ever known. The settlers held their breath, unsure of what would happen next. Some whispered anxiously, while others simply watched in silence, captivated by the unfolding story. Clara's father, her mother, and the neighbors waited, their hearts filled with anticipation. The valley itself seemed to hold its breath, the mountains standing as silent witnesses to this moment of truth and courage. Clara took a deep breath, steadying herself. She knew that the choice she was about to make would not be easy, but she also knew that courage and honesty had always guided her life. She took one step closer to Nantan, her eyes never leaving his. "I hear you," she said softly, yet firmly. "I see your respect, and I choose to trust you. But remember, everything must be fair, everything must be honorable, and nothing will happen without my full consent." Nantan's eyes lit up with a mixture of relief and quiet joy. He bowed slightly, his smile gentle but full of gratitude. "Thank you," he said simply. "Your trust is an honor, and I will honor it always." Clara felt a warmth spread through her chest. The fear that had gripped her moments before began to fade, replaced by a sense of connection and understanding she had never expected. The settlers began to exhale, the tension in the air slowly lifting. Thomas stepped forward, offering a nod of acknowledgement to Nantan. "It seems we may have misjudged," he said. Others murmured in agreement, realizing that the warrior before them had acted with honesty and respect, not aggression. Clara's family, once tense with worry, now felt a sense of cautious relief. The valley seemed to breathe again, the wind moving gently through the trees, as if sharing in the newfound peace. Clara turned to Nantan one last time, her voice soft but steady. "Remember," she said, "honor and respect must guide every action. We will be watched by history, and everything we do matters." Nantan nodded, his gaze unwavering. "I understand," he said. I will act with honor always. Your words guide me as much as my own heart. And in that moment, the standoff that had begun with fear and uncertainty transformed into a moment of courage, understanding, and quiet triumph. The valley, once filled with tension, now hummed with a sense of possibility. Clara had faced the unknown with bravery, Nanton had acted with honesty, and the settlers had begun to see that respect and understanding could bridge even the widest divides.